The genesis of anti-fashion has been set in motion. Since 2019, the fashion industry has been speed-running through trends, with society blindly following it in its footsteps. Social media has completely redefined every aspect of fashion, and we're finally starting to notice the damages that have accompanied these transformations occurring within the fashion industry in the last decade. Today, I'm discussing a new wave of anti-fashion. I'm not talking about any specific style that diverts from the mainstream, but rather a renewed collective attitude towards fashion as an industry, product, and mindset. I'll talk about why I think an increasing number of fashion consumers are pivoting to anti-fashion and anti-trends, and how this attitude relates to sustainability. I'll also touch on topics of what anti-fashion consists of and the rise of DIY culture. And as usual, my research and resources are limited, so I welcome thoughtful and insightful conversation in the comments. My name is Yemi, I'm your host, and let's get started. Speaking of sustainability, this video is sponsored by VIVAIA, an eco-friendly footwear brand that designs stylish shoes with sneaker-like comfort in mind. Whether you're heading to work, on a date, or just running errands, there's a pair for every occasion. You can even customize your boots with detachable leg warmers, or swap out Sneakerina shoelaces to match your outfit. Rain? No problem. The Regina Pro boots are water-repellent, and both the Allday and Cristina sneakers are machine washable. From easy slip-ons to sneakers with the ballet-inspired touch, VIVAIA shoes are made with both fashion and function in mind. And their shoes are made using recycled plastic bottles, so not only will you look good, but you'll feel good knowing that your fashion choices are sustainable. Now let me show you the pairs I got. These are the Cristina shoes in grey silver. You know I love combining sporty and feminine elements. These shoes match the theme perfectly with their sleek satin ribbon laces and the feel of a proper sneaker. Oh, and Bella Hadid wore these not once, but twice. Next, the Regina Pro boots in black cream have me speechless. Sleek silhouette, sock-like stretch, and all-day comfort. And if even Oprah wears them to work, you know they're doing something right. And as you know, I'm someone who loves multifunctionality in my closet, so having these different options for leg warmers is a huge plus for me. And finally, the all-day sneakers in black-white. Endlessly versatile, super comfortable, and anti-slip thanks to their rubber outsoles. I can style these with everything and walk miles in them without a second thought. Check the links in the description box to shop for my picks, and don't forget to use my code VYEMI for 12% off after the first 3 days of the upload date of this video, or 10% off anytime after that. And now, let's talk about anti-fashion. Anti-fashion and the downfall of fast fashion. Anti-fashion. It could be anything from dressing in a way that contrasts or opposes modern fashion, to choosing a way of life that allows us to not participate in fashion as a capitalist organization. At its core, anti-fashion resists the modes of production and marketing of fashion and doesn't exist for profit, but for the self-expression of one's identity and values. It's a big umbrella term for many subcultures, styles, and ways of thinking, and we know the fashion industry simultaneously despises and covets it. It is well known that fashion loves to borrow. Whether it's a subculture, youth culture, or traditional cultural attire, etc., the fashion industry is always taking from fashion and attempting to diminish its stature and core values. Mainstream fashion has always enjoyed turning rebellion into profitable fashion costumes. Because what's cooler than copying the rebels? Lately though, I've been noticing the resistance of anti-fashion growing stronger. Something's in the air. We're choosing underconsumption after surges of overconsumption. We're enjoying arts and crafts over impulse shopping and a slow way of living over hustle culture. People are choosing to educate themselves on not only topics within anti-fashion, but also on other matters like politics and climate crisis. My guess for why this is happening is because we're finally reaping what we've been sowing all these years as capitalist self-serving societies, and people are tired of participating in the problem. If you want to know my thoughts on that, my Hunger Games video discusses a lot of the themes that I will mention in this video. To understand why fast fashion is failing, we must investigate its original purpose and function. At its core, fashion is both a form of self-expression and an industry, and as an industry, it needs to make money. An easy way to do this is to use physical appearances, including dress, to judge and categorize members of society, thus creating hierarchies and dictating what is desirable amongst the masses. Fashion has and will always be both dependent on and leading social structures. In their essay, Marketing Sustainable Fashion, Trends and Future Directions, Subhasis, and Lipsa Nayak discuss fashion's function in society. It is a way of self-expressing and culturally constructing the embodied identity. Driven by social demands, fashion recurrently changes social forms, clothing habits, aesthetic judgment, and the entire style of human expression. It thus is a product designed by social demands and has a considerable influence on society, especially the upper class and the female population. Consequently, we also rely on fashion to keep our economy stable, because retail offers an abundance of employment even if the nature and quality of the employment is not sufficient or humane. Ray and Nayak continue, the industry faces an ever-growing demand on a global basis to keep up with the consumer's need for new things in their lives. Globally, the fashion industry employs a large workforce, creating a significant economic and social impact. However, it also faces criticism for its negative effect on ecology and social equity. So now that we understand fashion's role in a capitalist system, perhaps it makes more sense why we're starting to lean anti-fashion when looking at recent events. From various climate disasters to an economic crisis occurring across the globe, the biggest customer of fast fashion, the middle and lower classes, are suffering the biggest personal losses. The middle classes are beginning to disappear as the wealth gaps keep getting bigger, unemployment rates are skyrocketing, and the environmental crises hit the common folk the hardest. With increasing political uncertainty and unrest, though spending on fashion may initially sound like good stress relief, it is hardly a sensible choice for most who need to budget for $6 eggs instead. All the instability in the world is causing people to opt out of at least one fashion category: fast fashion. You see, fast fashion isn't what it used to be back when it was first introduced. According to Poppy Imogen Harold and Danielle Prokop in their essay, Is Fast Fashion Finally Out of Season? Rental clothing schemes as a sustainable and affordable alternative to fast fashion. Fast fashion gained traction in the 1980s, offering lower-income consumers easy access to fashion novelties, allowing them to participate in a market that they previously had no frequent access to. This turned middle-class income households into participants of fashion, and with the middle class being one of the biggest social classes, fashion became a very lucrative business. However, with this new pool of participants, fashion was met with more need, which led to the invention of cheap manufacturing alternatives, which in turn maxed out profits. And we've been seeing disastrous results downstream from these self-serving decisions, which we'll talk about more in the sustainability chapter. There are two things fast fashion keeps doing that have eventually spun out of control and caused their consumers to turn against them. Firstly, the quality of fast fashion clothes has become so bad that most attire has a very short lifespan. In their essay, Non-Sustainable Buying Behavior, How the Fear of Missing Out Drives Purchase Intentions in the Fast Fashion Industry, Blase et al. Researched this issue. Strikingly, most clothes are only worn 7 or 8 times on average before being discarded. Close to 3/4 of the clothes produced are estimated to end up in landfills or incinerators, and only 15% of the clothes are recycled into new clothing or made into cleaning clothes or insulation materials. Back in the 2000s, though the situation was still not great, fast fashion clothes were more durable overall, partly because new technologies and methods for producing lower quality clothing hadn't been utilized yet. Most of the clothes I bought as a teenager are still in good condition after over a decade of wash and wear. However, modern fast fashion clothing is not expected to last more than 1 or 2 washes before they're ruined and donated to thrift stores or trashed. With huge companies like Shein and Temu not only stealing designs from independent designers, but also selling clothes that have a very short lifespan, it is becoming increasingly less tempting for us as consumers to continue shopping fast fashion. Even brands like Zara that mark up their clothes significantly have reduced their quality to a point where the brand name can't justify the price. Shopping fast fashion simply isn't what it used to be. And though it did allow lower classes to participate in fashion, there is only so much we're willing to burn our savings for. Since this issue has become more widely known, alternatives like shopping secondhand for higher quality items have become more popular. The second issue is the noise of trends. They've only become louder, faster, and more wasteful than ever. These days, trends aren't seasonal. Hell, they're not even monthly anymore. Micro-trends have been here for a while, and they've completely eradicated any cultural or decade-specific value in trends. When we look back at the 2020s one day, we'll struggle pinpointing to significant or important trends because none of them are here to stay for longer than a couple months. What's worse is these trends exist almost exclusively in online spaces, and thus fashion has in some cases become more overt and unrealistic for everyday wear. I'm not going to delve into this more as I have done a deep dive of microtrends before, so make sure to check out my other videos if you're interested. Point being, the speed and consistency at which modern trends occur has created a wave of trend fatigue, with anyone who's not directly trying to be a fashionista choosing to sit out on the ridiculous pace of trends. In fact, I'm choosing to sit out of this mess because it's in no way sustainable, fun, interesting, or important to me anymore. Fast fashion has become a shit show with nothing holding value or significance, so why should we care about it? The fashion fatigue has us actively deciding to lean away from the norms and standards of modern fashion and focus on our own things. And it makes sense because let's face it, these days everything and nothing is in fashion. There is no logic or consistency anymore. Less of us are willing and able to participate in wasteful and meaningless consumption that grants us only immediate gratification and more clutter in our wardrobes. While it seems like things are fine now, this shift in fashion participants is already beginning to affect the trajectory of fashion as a money-making industry. The biggest loss for fashion and many other markets will be its priced out, overstimulated, and disadvantaged youth, who have had pretty much every opportunity of success and stable living taken away from them. My prediction is that the younger generations will be the largest group to pivot towards anti-fashion, both because of what it stands for and its accessibility. As Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore once said,
"Some people see rock and roll as youth culture, and when youth culture becomes monopolized by big business, what are the youth to do?"
Well, that's our next topic. Anti-fashion alternatives. There are at least 5 alternatives to mainstream fashion: sustainable fashion, thrifting, DIY alternatives such as sewing and adjustable clothes, clothing rentals, and adhering to personal style rather than fast fashion trends. Each of these serve the overall purpose of anti-fashion, allowing consumers to not only consume less, but to also consume outside of mainstream fashion corporations. To me, anti-fashion isn't about the complete denial of fashion or consumption, but rather a decision to focus our attention on alternative practices and methods of consumption that steer towards sustainable models that don't break the bank. And remember how I said fashion is both a form of self-expression and an industry. Anti-fashion focuses on self-expression rather than profit, which is why it serves humanity rather than capitalist gain. So let's talk about the origin and changes in anti-fashion real quick. In their essay, Fashion of the New Century, Modern Fashion or Expression of Social Status and Clothes for Success, Marija Kertakova and Jordan Efremov sum up anti-fashion. Anti-fashion often becomes a mass fashion that influences the fashion of all strata of society. An example is the fashion for jeans, which in the 1950s and 1960s were mainly seen as clothing for young people protesting against official norms, hipsters, hippies, leftist students. Today, denim fashion is ubiquitous and is losing its aura of rebellious fashion. This shows that the alternative culture has a huge innovative potential, which is assimilated and processed by the modern officially launched fashion. It's funny how the latest American Eagle and Sydney Sweeney jeans ad is displaying eugenics ideologies. What once was symbolism for resistance is now used as poor wordplay by and for white supremacists. And by the way, this is a good reminder that even fashion is political. Anti-fashion has gone through many shifts and changes throughout time, with one of the recent ones being post-COVID changes to people's way of living. Kertakova and Efremov suggest that post-COVID imposed new social paradigms, such as a shift towards slow living, prioritizing nature and a healthy lifestyle, and taking care of our environment. Kertakova and Efremov emphasize that today's modern world is a consumer and supporter of practical fashion, with cuts that are elegant but at the same time, if not more, functional, materials that are far more durable in terms of washing and ironing, and eclectic. Practicality, long-term durability, and fun fashion has always been something that's part of many alternative fashion styles. So how does one participate in anti-fashion? Let's have a look, shall we? The popularization of personal style. In Not So New news, fashion made a few huge mistakes in recent trend picks. Personal style. When personal style started trending in 2024, it opened new doors to many who didn't know of its availability and terminology. Discovering one's own personal style is a deeper journey than a find your aesthetic quiz on TikTok. By allowing personal style to trend, the fashion overlords essentially blessed personal style as an acceptable form of social dress, and even if their intention was to rescind that blessing, it stuck with some of us in the community. In a day and age where everyone looks the same due to popularized internet trends and global accessibility to various subcultures, having a personal style is considered simultaneously highly valuable, yet intimidating. Even popular marketing tactics like FOMO, aka the fear of missing out, render near useless when it comes to personal style, because personal style is not controlled by mainstream fashion trends. Of course, I can't discuss this without also noting that as it began trending, the definition of personal style was, and still is, deeply misunderstood. To this day, most assume personal style to reflect one's current style of dress. The issue is, most people dress according to trends. So in fact, their style is in no way personal, but just currently acceptable. This, however, is a misunderstanding that can be corrected, and I have faith that people who truly seek out personal style will come to understand what it's really about. I think Gupta et al. Summarized the difference in style and fashion well in their essay, The Role of Style versus Fashion Orientation on Sustainable Apparel Consumption. With reference to clothing, style is any distinctive mode of tailoring, while fashion is the style prevailing at any given time. Fashion is influenced by political, economic, and social currents. New fashions swiftly supersede the old, thus articulating freshness, novelty, and newness. A style, unlike fashion, reflects people's long-term identities and is true to the wearer. Style, similar to slow fashion, is not about responding to the latest trends. It resonates more personal meanings and reflects one's attitudes and lifestyle. Similar to slow fashion, style is not time or quantity-based, but is quality-based. Further, style and fashion orientations among consumers can lead to different consumption behaviors. Personal style omits the very purpose of fashion as a controlling entity because it serves the individual rather than the system. It doesn't obey the ever-ruling changes of dress, but instead focuses on its users' self-expression. If you want to learn more about personal style, I have a whole playlist you can go through to educate yourself. When desperation leads to innovation, the rising popularity of DIY and cultural fashion. With AI taking over everything from Hollywood to social media influencers, it is constantly receiving pushback from creative communities across the board, which I believe is one of the biggest reasons there is a surge in DIY spaces. As AI has been growing in popularity, so has its biggest competitor, creativity and innovation made by and for humans. This is why I believe there has been an increasing communal interest in DIY culture, as it not only offers human connection, innovation, and creativity, but because it also provides its participants with authentic hobbies, communities, and useful skills. Some popular examples are crochet communities, practical skills like gardening or property maintenance, and arts and crafts events. Whether it's customizing your skateboard before hitting the skate park or simply finding time to hang out with friends to make music, community-driven hobbies are finally starting to make a comeback. And when communities begin to form, creativity blossoms. AI may be able to create Elon Musk's ideal blonde anime girlfriend, but it cannot create community and authenticity. With regards to fashion, most people will stick to basic now-approved customization trends like Labubus, but more people are opting into learning new crafts to upgrade their wardrobes without having to get involved in mainstream fashion. And DIY doesn't have to be limited to the creation of clothing, but also includes adjustability, customization of pre-existing accessories and clothes, and smart purchase choices. Whether it's adding ribbons to your button-ups or making skirts out of ties, the age of DIY and customization is here. And then there's online spaces. We are living in an era of constant broadcast innovation. Everyone has a new trick, tip, or idea to share with the rest of the world, and most of these ideas aren't half bad. This is where the algorithm blesses us, when it allows space for creativity and innovation. The more exposed we are to these innovations, the more likely we are to partake in something similar ourselves. Not the worst thing to be influenced by, if you ask me. Additionally, there is something else linked to DIY and customization culture. A resurfaced interest in cultural attire. I want to bring to your attention an insightful essay I read on traditional attire and its connection to sustainable fashion. Towards sustainable products and services, the influences of traditional costumes in promoting sustainable fashion by Lee et al. The essay highlights the influence of culture on fashion. Costumes are one of humanity's essential needs. While styles and wearing habits evolve over time, the culture of dress has continuously accumulated through the years. Costumes often reflect the dominant attitudes of the era in which they exist. As traditional cultural materials, dressing habits are passed down through generations. Alongside language, customs, and folklore, costumes are integral components of culture, embodying aspects of the past that resonate in the present. This focus on preserving physical entities and traditional patterns can sometimes overshadow their adaptability in modern contexts. As Mike Robinson and Elaine Silverman pointed out, heritage may become physically isolated or conceptually fossilized. Therefore, it is crucial to reinterpret traditional cultures passed down through generations, ensuring that cultural heritage remains relevant and not just confined to museums. Lee et al. Also talk about how one's aesthetic preferences are profoundly influenced by cultural contexts in which they were raised or trained. While the fashion industry is still highly populated with non-culture specific designs, there are many old and new designers who incorporate the visual language of traditional costumes into their products. I think one of the most fascinating things that's been ongoing is that the younger generations have a fun approach towards traditional cultural attire, to incorporate it into modern fashion. Whether it's hakama pants paired with a minimalist black outfit or wearing an Allday to get groceries, an interest in fashion of the past has been growing. Personally, I think it's wonderful that people incorporate hand-me-downs and thrifted vintage fashion from their home country in their everyday wardrobes. Fashion has been globally stagnant for far too long, and I hope we can continue to bring back cultural attire. The last thing I want to highlight is how DIY, like most things, has been turned into performative overconsumption through big corporations. The Labubus and bag charms get discarded the moment minimalism makes a comeback in the industry. Stephen Threadgold talks about this in his essay, Creativity, Precarity, and Illusio, DIY Cultures and Choosing Poverty. More generally, the concept of DIY seems to have undergone a process of co-optation. It is now invoked in marketing to encourage forms of consumption such as home decorating and renovations and other forms of consumption and self-improvement. Big box companies such as Bunnings and IKEA use DIY in their marketing collateral. Home brewing and cheese-making sets are sold online with marketing directed at the so-called hipster market. I encourage any regular consumer of online spaces to always remember that not every creator or brand has your best interest at heart, and that corporations ultimately need to make money, whether it's through your crochet projects and a barista machine. Threadgold also talks about how DIY culture has been adopted lately by younger people as they have to navigate through extremely unnatural and now normalized circumstances like mass unemployment, unrewarding university degrees, and the complete erasure of youth spaces in countries like the US. So what are the youth to do? Circling back to Sonic Youth,
I think we should destroy the bogus capitalist process that is destroying youth culture.
In this absolute hellhole that has been created for younger generations, let us encourage them and one another to pursue our creative and artistic passions, to connect, to stay grounded, and rebuild those communal spaces. You may be only a single person, but you can be a wave in the sea of change to help build the future for those who come after us. How the anti-fashion attitude relates and contributes to sustainability. Fashion sustainability comes in many forms like shopping sustainably, thrifting and secondhand shopping, making your own clothes, and opting for clothes that are adjustable for maximum customization and reuse. I want to discuss some of the benefits and limitations around these options as there are some issues I've noticed. Accessibility, time, and budget limitations. Sustainability is such a tricky subject to navigate, not because it's impossible to achieve amongst the masses, but because we must acknowledge its limitations. Not everyone can afford to drop $150 on Everlane Mary Janes, and not everyone has easy access to thrift stores with well-priced and good quality clothing. And while adjustability can fix some of the limitations in our closet via techniques like using drawstrings and buttons to adjust the size and fit of clothes, it is not commonly practiced in fashion design. Making our own clothes is another option, but unless textile pricing is set to a lower cost or you get lucky, it can become a costly and time-consuming hobby. Clothing rentals are great for people who can afford it, but they're not as cheap as most thrifting, and rental companies need to continuously supply new inventory to meet their customers' needs. While none of these options are perfect, they all offer a good alternative to mainstream fashion. However, one way to steer towards sustainability overall is anti-consumption, which Ray and Nayak talk about. Anti-consumption opposes the speedy production and consumption of fast fashion. Consumer behavior can be conditioned with some negative beliefs associated with fast fashion. A few such beliefs include poor performance, overly trendy styles, big store discomfort, de-individuation, irresponsibility, foreignness, and inauthenticity, leading to the behavioral intention for fast fashion avoidance. Fast fashion customers often feel guilty about discarding costly, higher quality goods that they have worn only a few times, and they end up donating them to charities. However, inexpensive clothing used for socializing soon becomes unsuitable due to wear and tear, and is thrown and later incinerated. SF promotes a minimalist closet or wardrobe, also known as a capsule wardrobe, having limited clothing that focuses on quality, longevity, and minimal or classic design. Consumers having capsule wardrobes report feeling less stressed, detached from fashion trends, finding joy in their fashion style, and an enhanced awareness of ethical consumption. The rate at which we're consuming is alarming, but I'm hopeful that given the dire economic situations most of us are going through, we'll feel less like consuming fast fashion products or slowing down consumption overall. Because of its nature, anti-fashion and especially anti-consumption is not a tempting option for the masses, and especially those from lower-income households. Rather than a necessity, fair and true labor is a privilege and a blessing if you can afford it in the form of creation or purchase. What we need to do is combine sustainable and circular modes of fashion consumption with anti-fashion and anti-consumption mindset. You may have noticed that by now we're stuck in an almost paradox-like situation, wanting to promote anti-consumption but also having to promote alternative forms of consumption. As Gupta et al. Say, the term sustainable fashion would seem to be somewhat of an oxymoron for the industry. It is an industry that is driven by speed, change, artificial newness, and obsolescence. Fletcher argues that sustainability in the fashion industry cannot be obtained through attempts to minimize apparel consumption. Sustainable fashion should be something more attractive, as it should help consumers reconnect with their clothes, their design concepts, and reflect their personalities, thus making a healthier relationship among consumers and their clothes. Lee et al. Support this statement with, researchers emphasize that beyond environmental factors, the core issue of sustainable fashion is to create diverse and accessible products that resonate with consumers' aesthetic preferences, needs, and emotions. Therefore, designers can adopt flexible and context-appropriate principles of design for sustainability in their products and services. This means that we must combine all of our options to combat mainstream fashion, because there is no single fix-it-all solution to our problems. Also, a key factor in achieving sustainability goals is to keep people informed and create spaces and communities that help guide and educate individuals on sustainable fashion. These could be anything from sewing and knitting communities to local market events. Even providing information on sustainable alternatives to fast fashion brands is progress. For example, my knowledge on how to verify a brand's sustainability is limited. So what I like to do is use this website Good On You to check a brand's sustainability rating. I'm not going to dwell on this topic, but naturally, because sustainable fashion is considered a good practice, even fast fashion companies attempt to appear sustainable to their audience. This is what we call greenwashing. The idea was that if most consumers focused less on mainstream fashion, major brands would be incentivized to slow down production and the turnaround times for trends, and maybe even introduce more sustainable methods of production and marketing. But of course, that's too much to ask of these money-grabbing companies. Blase et al. Discussed these going green efforts. However, progress towards sustainability in the fashion industry is often prevented by their own business model based on the need to produce clothes cheaply and to offer new fashion trends in quick succession and at low prices. Companies communicate about their sustainable production and create green labels for their products to influence consumer behavior. Sustainability has been one of the it girls in town for a while now, and just like the Ariana Grande impersonator, companies are pretending like they're abiding by these it girl rules and being sustainable, and that in turn makes their customers feel like they're less guilty about their purchase decisions. However, they are lying just to make you feel better and make you buy more expensive products that were manufactured cheaply. So remember, when you're shopping for sustainable alternatives, always check if the company's actually sustainable or if they're just greenwashing to demand higher prices for non-sustainable clothing. We can, however, celebrate recent strides towards sustainability and anti-fashion through international efforts. Recently, France passed a new climate bill that will impose penalties for fast fashion, specifically targeting ultra-fast fashion brands like Shein and Temu. In some ways, France regulating fast fashion just may be one of the few solutions that takes the temptation of fast fashion away from the consumer, which in turn resets their shopping habits and allows them to explore other eco-friendlier shopping options. It may even prevent them from going on excessive shopping sprees when every top doesn't cost €5 anymore. And though it is not intentional, the tariff changes in the US have also begun to slow down fast fashion consumption. Papasalomo et al. Discuss one of these recent changes in the European Commission in their essay, The Fast Fashion versus Environment Debate, Consumers' Level of Awareness, Feelings, and Behavior Towards Sustainability Within the Fast Fashion Sector. In March 2020, the Commission adopted a new Circular Economy Action Plan, which constitutes of one of the main building blocks of the European Green Deal and it is essentially Europe's new agenda for sustainable growth. The new action plan aims at enforcing new measures along the entire life cycle of products, including textiles, and in doing that move closer to a green future whilst aiming at strengthening business competitiveness, environmental protection, and giving new rights to consumers and production workers. So though they're baby steps, we are taking the necessary steps to slowly clean up the mess that modern fashion has become. Conclusion. While I don't believe a huge proportion of individuals will turn to anti-fashion, I do believe the number of participants will continue to grow, especially if Gen Z and Gen Alpha are educated on sustainability and choose to go the anti-fashion route over fast fashion. I don't, however, believe that mainstream fashion can sustain a system that keeps excluding an increasing number of participants while maintaining their current pace. Whether we choose it or not, through capitalist endgames, many of us won't be participating in fashion like we used to. Perhaps it's a grim outlook on the matter, but what comforts me is that we can still return to long-used practices from history, such as shopping locally and from independent businesses and learning practical skills to enhance our lives. Capitalism and modern modes of living may have removed the need for crafts like dressmaking and metalwork, but that doesn't mean we can't bring them back. Fashion always works as a double-edged sword against its consumers and itself, for where there's a chainmail dress sold by Versace for $5,000, there's a small Redditor showing you how to make your own chainmail dress at home. The internet, while being a consumerist nightmare, can also be a spring of knowledge if we choose to use it right. Ultimately, while most things in our lives are out of control, we can choose the approach we take here on out. My fellow anti-fashion friends, I thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content you're seeing, and as always, I'll see you next time.